On the night of Halloween, a collective, almost ritualistic transformation sweeps across society. It is a night dedicated to the externalization of fear, a time when individuals voluntarily don the guises of terror. They cloak themselves in the visages of vampires, zombies, and spectral entities, adorning their skin with artificial wounds and pallid makeup. This masquerade serves a profound psychological purpose. By embodying the monstrous, people seek to domesticate it, to render fear a tangible, wearable, and therefore controllable commodity. The grotesque costumes and simulated gore are a bravado-filled performance, a declaration to the world and to themselves that they are not the victims of fear, but its masters, if only for a single evening. They posture and snarl, attempting to project an aura of danger, to become the very thing that would make a child gasp and an adult glance twice over their shoulder in the dim glow of a jack-o'-lantern. Yet, this entire spectacle rests upon a fundamental and often unexamined premise that fear is an external force, a predator that can be seen, heard, and identified. The unsettling truth, however, is that the most formidable presence in any room is not the one adorned in the most terrifying costume. It is the individual who requires no costume at all. This is the Sigma male. His power does not stem from a pretense of fearlessness, but from a genuine, intrinsic state of it. The paradoxical reality is that the archetypal monsters of our myths and movies would not hunt the Sigma. They would, in fact, find him to be an inexplicable and threatening anomaly. This is not because the Sigma is inherently violent or cruel. He does not need to dominate a conversation with a booming voice or command a space with aggressive physicality. His potency lies in a quality so antithetical to modern noise that it becomes profoundly disquieting. His silence, a monster, by its very nature, announces its threat. It bares its fangs. It unleashes its roar. It makes its malevolent intentions clear. A classic villain reveals his scheme, driven by a lust for power, revenge, or chaos. These are known quantities. Their patterns, however horrifying, are decipherable. The Sigma male, in stark contrast, is an enigma. He is a closed system, a book written in a language for which there is no Rosetta Stone. He cannot be easily read. His next move cannot be reliably predicted, and the very notion of controlling him is a fool's errand. This is the core of the profound intimidation he evokes. While a nightmare creature, a fictional monster, attacks the physical self, the body, the Sigma male poses a threat to something far more foundational, the sanctity and stability of the mind. He challenges the very frameworks through which we understand social interaction, power, and control, leaving those who encounter him feeling psychologically exposed and unnervingly vulnerable. 1. The anatomy of intimidation, beyond the bark to the unwavering gaze. The common conception of intimidation is a crude and simplistic one, largely shaped by primal instincts and popular media. It is conflated with overt, demonstrative signals of power, immense physical stature, a confrontational and aggressive demeanor, a voice that drowns out all others, or a personality that seeks to dominate and subjugate every social sphere it enters. This is intimidation as a blunt instrument, a force that operates through clear, audible, and visible channels. However, this understanding only scratches the surface of human psychology. True, deep-seated intimidation, the kind that settles in the pit of the stomach and lingers in the subconscious, originates from a far more complex and elusive source. It is born from mystery, from the unnerving presence of the unpredictable, from the individual who steadfastly refuses to be categorized, labeled, or slotted into any recognizable social archetype that would allow for easy manipulation or understanding. This is a precise, psychological fulcrum upon which the Sigma male's intimidating presence balances. People are not unnerved by him because he is loud, but because he is impenetrably quiet. They are not afraid because he is aggressive, but because he is unshakably calm. The fear he inspires is a reaction to a man who operates on a frequency they cannot tune into. They encounter a person who does not react to provocation, who does not engage in the frantic chase for social status or validation, who does not seem to need the approval of the herd to validate his existence, and who possesses profound inner fortitude to walk away from any situation, any relationship, or any conflict without hesitation, and, most importantly, without looking back. This last trait is particularly devastating to the modern psyche, which is often conditioned to seek closure and validation. The underlying, simple, Yet profound psychological reason for this intimidation is an unassailable equation. You hold no power over a man who has absolute power over himself. When most people interact, they engage in a constant, often subconscious, exchange of social and emotional signals. The insecure individual radiates a desperate need for acceptance. His every action is a plea to be included. The arrogant man broadcasts his need for validation. His bluster is a shield for his fragility. The jealous person is easily led into competition. His motivations transparent and easily manipulated. The emotionally volatile individual is a puppet whose strings are his own reactions, easily pulled by those who know how to provoke him. When these individuals face a sigma male, however, they are met with a void. There is no signal to decode, no emotional tell to exploit, no visible weakness to target. There is only a calm, observant silence and an unshakable presence that seems entirely self-contained. This silence does not accuse or threaten. It simply is. And in its passive existence, it becomes a mirror, forcing those in its presence to confront their own insecurities, their own neediness, their own tangled web of emotional dependencies. The Sigma is not actively judging them, but his very composure serves as an involuntary indictment of their lack thereof. He does not cultivate an aura of mystery as a strategy. It is a natural byproduct of his character. He is a perpetual observer, absorbing more information than he disseminates. He analyzes situations and people with a quiet, detached precision, preferring to study the social landscape rather than loudly proclaim his place within it. And this analytical gaze is felt. A Sigma male can occupy a corner of a room, not uttering a single word for an hour, and yet someone will inevitably feel compelled to perform for him, to impress him, to seek his tacit approval. He demands nothing, yet his calm, controlled aura makes others acutely, uncomfortably aware of their own performative nature, their own flaws, and their own need for external affirmation. 2. The resonating power of silence. Why a whisper can drown out a scream. The popular imagination, fed by a diet of horror cinema and folklore, depicts monsters as cacophonous entities. Their terror is auditory, the earth-shaking roar of a beast, the piercing shriek of a banshee, the chaotic clamor of destruction. This aligns with a basic human instinct. A loud, identifiable threat can be confronted, fled from, or prepared for. The truth, however, is that the most potent and psychologically debilitating form of terror is not found in noise, but in its absolute absence. Silence is a canvas upon which the mind paints its own worst nightmares. Silence is what makes the skin prickle with anticipation, the imagination run wild with possibilities far more terrifying than any concrete reality. It is a void that the human psyche, in its inability to tolerate uncertainty, feels compelled to fill with its own deeply personal phase. This is a domain where the Sigma male transitioned from being merely enigmatic to being perceived as genuinely formidable. His strength is not vocal but vibrational. He feels no compulsion to raise his voice to assert authority, to issue threats to establish boundaries, or to boast of his accomplishments to validate his worth. His power is communicated through a deliberate and potent quietude. When he chooses to go silent, the effect on a social environment is palpable. This is because silence emanating from a man who is known to be highly observant, analytical, and perpetually calm is infinitely more intimidating than the explosive anger of a hothead. The latter is a temporary storm, predictable in its pattern and ultimately manageable. The former is a deepening fog, obscuring all landmarks and leaving others psychologically disoriented. Consider the typical emotional responses to conflict. When the average person is pushed to their limit, they erupt. Their anger is externalized in a burst of words and actions. When a weaker-willed individual is upset, they may resort to passive-aggressive complaints or seek sympathy from others. But when a Sigma male is subjected to pressure that crosses an invisible threshold, his reaction is not an explosion, but an implosion of controlled detachment. He does not lash out, he withdraws. He shuts down emotionally and mentally, not as an act of surrender, but as the ultimate expression of self-control. There is no reaction to gauge, no warning of impending retaliation, no visible sign of what his next move might be. This creates a vacuum of uncertainty, and as established, human beings are deeply unsettled by what they cannot read and, therefore, cannot prepare for. Most individuals operate within social interactions by relying on emotional feedback loops. They prod and provoke, seeking the gratifying or reassuring data point of a reaction. They want to see irritation to know they have gotten under someone's skin. They want to see frustration to confirm their own leverage. They want to see anger to understand the boundaries of the conflict. These emotional outputs provide them with a map of the social terrain, telling them how safe they are and how much control they wield. The Sigma male refuses to provide this data. He offers nothing but a placid, unreadable surface. His silence becomes a form of psychological pressure, a passive-aggressive force that induces anxiety, forces overthinking, and spawns a cascade of internal questions. What is he thinking? What did I do wrong? What is he planning? The silent demeanor of the Sigma communicates a multi-layered, unspoken message that is psychologically devastating. I see everything you are doing, and I am not impressed. Your attempt to provoke me are transparent and meaningless. I do not need your approval to feel whole, and I do not fear the consequences of your displeasure. It is a living, breathing reminder of the immense power inherent in restraint. A man who can master his own reactions is a man who cannot be easily manipulated. A man who can remain a still, calm center in the midst of surrounding chaos is a man who cannot be defeated through conventional means. A man who does not respond to obvious provocation is a man who retains absolute sovereignty over when and how an interaction concludes, a power that does not belong to provocateur, but to him. 3. The kryptonite of manipulators. Why the Sigma male is an untouchable fortress. Manipulators, in all their forms, from the subtle emotional guilt tripper to the overt narcissist, are psychological parasites. Their survival and sense of power are contingent upon their ability to feed on the emotional chaos of others. They are masters of creating confusion, provoking reactive responses, and twisting perceptions until their victims begin to doubt their own sanity and judgment. This manipulative strategy is tragically effective against the majority of people because it preys on fundamental human vulnerabilities. The deep-seated craving for social approval, the addiction to external attention, and the existential fear of being ostracized or alone. The Sigma male, however, represents the absolute antithesis of the manipulator's ideal target. He is, in essence, an emotionally self-contained unit. His sense of self-worth, his internal validation, and his emotional equilibrium are generated from within. He does not require a constant stream of external validation to feel secure in his identity. He does not harbor a pathological fear of solitude. In fact, he often cherishes it. He does not desperately chase acceptance from any group or individual. This profound emotional independence single-handedly neutralizes a manipulator's entire arsenal before it can even be deployed. The core principle is inescapable. You cannot control a man who has nothing you can take from him. You cannot intimidate someone who is not afraid to lose you and walk away. This is a foundational, unassailable advantage of a Sigma archetype. When a manipulator first sets their sights on a Sigma, the interaction follows a predictable and, for the manipulator, deeply unsettling pattern. The manipulator, accustomed to their tricks yielding a profitable emotional payoff, begins their standard routine. They deploy guilt trips, expecting to induce compliance. They initiate mind games, anticipating confusion and self-doubt. They launch subtle, veiled insults, waiting for a defensive or hurt reaction. Yet, with the Sigma, these tactics yield no result. They do not provoke panic, they do not trigger defensive justification, and they do not elicit any visible emotional reaction. Instead of engaging, the Sigma simply observes. His demeanor remains calm, his silence profound, his gaze analytical and penetrating. This observational silence is, in itself, a formidable weapon. While the manipulator is talking, weaving their web of words, the Sigma is not listening to the narrative itself. He is listening to the intent lurking beneath the narrative. He is a master at picking up on micro-expressions, the fleeting grimace, the false smile, the dilation of pupils. He notes inconsistencies in stories and logic. He recognizes the well-worn patterns of manipulation, love bombing followed by withdrawal, the creation of false dilemmas, the use of emotional blackmail. He can discern a hidden motive with a speed and accuracy that often outstrips the manipulator's own awareness of their own tactics. Once the Sigma has successfully decoded the manipulative game being played, his response is both brutal and elegant in its simplicity. He disconnects. This disconnection is not a dramatic, scene-ending declaration. It is not a fiery confrontation or a list of grievances. It is a quiet, internal, and decisive severing of emotional access. He mentally and emotionally revokes the manipulator's visa to his inner world. And once a Sigma ceases to grant someone this emotional energy, that person's power over him evaporates instantly. Manipulators are left grasping at air, their emotional hooks finding nothing to latch onto, no insecurity to exploit, no desperation to leverage, no fear of loss to amplify. What truly terrifies a seasoned manipulator about the Sigma is the sheer silence of his exit. There are no warnings, no drawn-out arguments, no satisfying closure for the manipulator to potentially twist and use. The Sigma simply detaches and vanishes, either mentally, by becoming a ghost in the room, or physically, by removing himself entirely. Because manipulators derive their power from keeping their targets in a state of confused emotional dependency, this silent, unexplained withdrawal is psychologically devastating to them. They are left in a torturous state of uncertainty. They do not know what he is thinking. They do not know how much he figured out. They do not know if they were exposed or simply deemed uninteresting. This ambiguity and lack of control is a form of psychological torture for someone whose entire existence is built on predictability and control. For the labyrinthine mind, the psychological sovereignty of the Sigma male. The cognitive architecture of a Sigma male is a landscape of profound depth and formidable intensity, a mental ecosystem that is both captivating to the curious and intimidating to the conventional. Unlike the more familiar social archetypes, the dominant alpha, the supportive beta, the intellectual gamma, the Sigma operates from a position entirely outside of, and often indifferent to, established social hierarchies and their unwritten rules. This independence from the tribal mindset fosters a degree of mental clarity and self-reliance that can be deeply unsettling to those who derive their identity and security from group consensus and social validation. Where the average person thinks in relatively linear, socially conditioned patterns, if I do A, I will receive social reward B, or if I defy norm C, I will face social punishment D, the Sigma male analyzes situations through a multidimensional lens. His thought processes are not merely strategic in a tactical sense. They are layered with a philosophical and psychological depth that makes his presence uniquely disarming. He is often playing a game of mental chess, anticipating moves several steps ahead, not through malice, but through a natural propensity for pattern recognition and outcome simulation. To encounter such a mind is to feel as though one is standing before a mirror that does not merely reflect one's appearance, but also one's hidden insecurities, unspoken motivations, and cognitive limitations. A core element of the psychological danger posed by the Sigma's mind is its capacity for radical emotional detachment. This is not to be mistaken for a lack of emotion or empathy, but rather for a supreme ability to prevent emotion from hijacking the cognitive process. While most individuals are driven, often unconsciously, by the current of ego, the fear of social judgment, or the desire for validation, the Sigma views these forces as variables to be calculated, or as weaknesses to be navigated and neutralized. This detachment is the bedrock of his self-sovereignty. For the manipulator, the narcissist, or the social climber, this emotional immunity is profoundly threatening. The Sigma male possesses an almost uncanny ability to peer past the words and actions of others and directly perceive the underlying intentions, exposing vulnerabilities and hidden agendas that the individual may have successfully concealed from the rest of the world. This makes him a formidable and destabilizing presence for anyone who relies on social leverage or deceit, as he simply cannot be influenced by the emotional pressure tactics that work on others. This psychological potency is further amplified by his inherent unpredictability. A Sigma male does not operate from a standard social script. His autonomy allows him to act in ways that are often incomprehensible to those whose behavior is governed by a desire to fit in or gain approval. His decisions, while perfectly rational in principle from his internal frame of reference, may appear erratic, enigmatic, or even irrational to the outside observer. This quality generates a deep-seated psychological unease in others, as it denies them the comfort of prediction and control. People become unnerved when they cannot anticipate the next move of someone who possesses such quiet confidence and mental independence. The Sigma's capacity to detach from conventional norms and act solely from a place of internal reason, personal ethics, or sharp intuition makes him psychologically formidable, creating a subtle but persistent tension in any social environment he inhabits. 5. The unassailable fortress, the potent power of emotional independence. The emotional independence of the Sigma male is a force so subtle yet so potent that it is rarely understood in its full magnitude, yet it remains one of the most defining and intimidating aspects of his character. In a world where the majority of individuals are psychologically tethered to the opinions of their peers, swayed by the fear of social judgment, and driven by a deep-seated need to belong, the Sigma stands as a monument to self-governance. His sense of self-worth is an internally generated phenomenon. It is not a currency that fluctuates with the approval of his colleagues, the accolades of his industry, or even the validation of his closest companions. This radical autonomy grants him the ability to navigate complexities of life with a clarity and calmness that seems almost superhuman, rendering him immune to the emotional manipulation, social pressure, and petty interpersonal dramas that consume and define the lives of so many others. To observe a Sigma male in a high-stakes or emotionally charged situation is to witness a person who is the epitome of emotional sovereignty. He is immune to the panic that grips the crowd, immune to the coercion attempt of the manipulator, and immune to the tempest of drama that swirls around less-centered individuals. What makes this independence so psychologically intimidating is that it effectively renders the Sigma untouchable within the standard arenas of social and emotional combat. Individuals who attempt to provoke him, guilt-trip him, or leverage social pressure against him quickly discover, to their frustration and unease, that their standard toolkit of influence is utterly ineffective. Unlike those who react impulsively to fear, anger, or social shaming, the Sigma remains an island of composure, evaluating every variable with cold reason and long-term foresight, entirely unswayed by transient emotions. This calm, unshakable demeanor in the face of external chaos creates a visceral discomfort in others. People are instinctively wired to seek emotional feedback. It is a key component of social navigation. When they interact with the Sigma, they sense that their normal leverage, the ability to provoke a reaction, to incite an emotional response, is non-existent. This realization can trigger a deep-seated unease, and sometimes even a form of fear, because it implies a level of self-control and inner power that they themselves do not possess. It challenges their entire understanding of how human relationships and power dynamics are supposed to function. 6. The magnetic pole of unpredictability, the unnerving power of autonomous action. Among the most striking and psychologically potent traits of the Sigma male is his fundamental unpredictability. This is not the chaotic unpredictability of a reckless individual, but the calculated, principled unpredictability of a sovereign mind. The vast majority of people act according to deeply ingrained social scripts and expectations. Their behaviors, goals, and reactions are heavily influenced by a desire for inclusion, a fear of ostracism, and a need to appease the perceived judgments of their family, peers, and society at large. The Sigma male, in stark contrast, operates from an entirely internal locus of control. He does not conform to societal norms for the sake of easy acceptance, nor does he act in certain ways to satisfy the expectations of others. Every decision he makes, every path he chooses, is filtered through his own personal code of ethics, his independent reasoning, and his intuitive understanding of situation. This resolute refusal to be bound by predictable, conventional patterns is not an act of rebellion performed for attention. It is the authentic expression of a truly autonomous individual. For those who encounter it, this quality is both magnetically attractive and deeply unsettling. They are faced with an individual whose behavior cannot be reliably anticipated, whose motivations cannot be easily discerned, and whose actions cannot be controlled through conventional social pressures. This creates a unique psychological dynamic where the Sigma is often the center of gravity in a room without ever trying to be. The impact of this trait on others is profound. Human beings are hardwired to seek predictability. It is a cornerstone of our sense of safety and control. When confronted with someone whose behavior defies easy categorization and prediction, especially someone who exudes a quiet confidence and composure, it creates a deep-seated cognitive dissonance. Leaders may command through overt authority, and manipulators may attempt to control through clever strategy, but the Sigma's influence requires no such overt displays. His unpredictability alone introduces a subtle but persistent tension into social dynamics, as others instinctively recognize that their usual methods of influence and control are useless against him. This subtle disorientation forces people to constantly reassess their assumptions and strategies, often leaving them mentally and emotionally fatigued. What makes the Sigma's unpredictability truly formidable is the seamless fusion of this trait with his overarching composure. While others, when faced with the unexpected, react impulsively, flailing emotionally in an attempt to regain control or predict an outcome, the Sigma remains calm, deliberate, and unflappable. This combination of autonomous action and serene self-possession magnifies the psychological tension he creates exponentially. People can sense the invisible boundaries of his influence. They feel a magnetic pull toward his enigmatic nature while simultaneously recognizing, on an instinctual level, that any attempt to manipulate, control, or even predict him will end in failure. It is this potent balance of autonomy, mystery, and silent, unassailable command that makes the Sigma male psychologically intimidating in a way that raw authority or blatant aggression could never hope to achieve. Conclusion: the shadow in the corner of the room. When the sun descends and night enshrouds a world, when shadows elongate and merge into a tapestry of darkness, our oldest stories tell us that monsters emerge. These creatures of myth and nightmare, born from fear itself, are said to stalk the empty streets and haunt the unwary, ready to pounce from the gloom. But this narrative, for all its visceral power, misses a far darker, more unsettling truth. The real monsters are not the ones who hide in the darkness, waiting for a specific night to reveal themselves. They walk among us in the full light of day, calm, composed, and integrated into the fabric of ordinary life. They are untouchable not because they are supernatural, but because they are supremely, completely natural in their self-possession. The Sigma male is the embodiment of this terrifying presence. He is a living paradox, a man who does not chase the power that others crave, who does not thirst for the validation that others desperately seek, and who does not fear the chaos and uncertainty that makes others crumble into anxiety. His mind is a labyrinth of strategic depth and philosophical insight. His emotional independence is an impregnable fortress. His inherent unpredictability is a weapon that requires no wielding. People do not fear him because he raises his fist or raises his voice. They fear him because his very existence exposes the fragile, carefully constructed illusions that govern their lives. The illusion that social approval grants worth, that conformity ensures safety, and that emotional reactions are a sign of strength. On a night like Halloween, when fear is ritualized, commercialized, and worn as a costume, the Sigma male stands as living proof that the most potent form of danger is silent, invisible, and operates on a psychological plane. He is a shadow in the corner of the room that makes you second-guess your own words and actions. He is the presence that unnerves without uttering a single sound. He is a quiet force that reminds everyone in his vicinity that some monsters do not need fangs, claws, or a horrifying visage to be feared. They only require a mind that is sharp, a will that is unbreakable, and a spirit that is unbound by any force other than its own sovereign rules. So, this Halloween, as you see the pretend monsters and the simulated fear, remember this: the Sigma male does not fear the monsters under the bed or in the closet. In the theater of the human psyche, the real monsters are the ones who have learned, to their own unease, to fear him. Do these ideas resonate with you? If you found yourself nodding along or reflecting deeply on the traits and experiences we explored in this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The Sigma male mindset isn't often talked about openly, and your perspective, whether you identify with it personally or have encountered it in others, adds valuable depth to the conversation. Drop a comment below and let me know. Which part hit home the most for you? Have you seen these traits in yourself or someone you know? Your insights help build a community where authenticity and growth are prioritized over popularity and performance. If you're drawn to this kind of introspective, no-nonsense content around Sigma males, psychological strength, emotional intelligence, and high-value living, there's more waiting for you. Explore the other videos on this channel for deeper dives, actionable insights, and raw truths that cut through the noise. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay sharp, stay grounded, and stay unapologetically real. Until next time.